The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled in the morning wind as two armies faced each other across the valley. On one side stood the humans, their small colony defense force looking tiny compared to their enemies. On the other side waited the Zephyrian Empire forces, tall alien warriors with forearms and skin like armor. Captain Lisa Morgan stood at the front of her people, watching the alien army through her binoculars. She was 38 years old with gray streaks in her brown hair. Her uniform was clean but showed signs of hard use. She had been a Marine for 12 years before coming to this distant planet to protect the mining colony. The Zephyrians were impressive and frightening. Each warrior stood 8 feet tall with thick gray skin that looked like natural armor. Their forearms moved with practiced grace, each hand holding weapons or tools. Their leader, General Vexthar, was even bigger than the rest. His eyes glowed yellow in his alien face, and scars covered his arms from many battles. Lisa lowered her binoculars and turned to her aide. Lieutenant Jake Powell was young, maybe 25, with nervous energy that showed in his quick movements. He had been on the planet for only 6 months. They asked for this meeting, Jake said quietly. What do you think they want? To demand our surrender, most likely, Lisa replied. She looked back at the alien army. They think we're weak because we're smaller than them. The meeting was supposed to happen at noon in the neutral zone between the two forces. Lisa had agreed to it because any chance to avoid a full battle was worth taking. Her people were brave, but they were miners and engineers, not soldiers. She had only 50 trained security personnel against 300 alien warriors. At exactly noon, General Vexthar walked into the empty space between the armies. He moved with confidence, his forearms swinging freely. 2 smaller Zephyrians followed him. His officers, Commander Theknor and Captain Zilketh. Lisa walked out to meet them, bringing only Jake with her. The difference in size was clear as she approached. The general towered over her, his shadow covering her completely. Human captain, Vexthar said in perfect English. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. I am General Vexthar of the Zephyrian Third Fleet. You will surrender this world to the Empire. I'm Captain Lisa Morgan, she replied calmly. This world belongs to Earth and the human colonies. We won't surrender. The general laughed, a sound like distant thunder. Look around you, small human. My warriors could crush your entire force in minutes. Your people are weak and soft. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no strength. Lisa kept her face calm, but inside she was studying the alien leader. His posture showed complete confidence. He believed every word he was saying. That confidence might be useful. We may be smaller, Lisa said, but we're not leaving. Vexithar's yellow eyes narrowed. He looked back at his army, then at the small group of humans watching from their side of the valley. His officers said something in their alien language, words that sounded like metal scraping on stone. You amuse me, human, the general said finally. Very well. I offer you a chance to save your people's lives. I challenge your strongest warrior to single combat. If your champion wins, my forces will leave this world. If I win, you will abandon your colony immediately. Lisa felt Jake tense beside her. This was not what they had expected. A challenge fight was an old tradition among many alien species, but she had not thought the Zephyrians would offer such terms. Single combat? She asked. What are the rules? No weapons. No armor beyond what occurs naturally. Fight until one cannot continue. Vexithar flexed his forearms, showing muscles like steel cables under his thick skin. I have never been defeated in such combat. No human has the strength to even scratch my hide, much less break through my guard. The general's voice grew louder, carrying across the valley to both armies. I have fought the warriors of 12 different worlds. I have killed the champions of 6 different species. No being in this galaxy can break the defensive techniques of the Zephyrian Empire. Lisa looked at the alien general's confident stance. His forearms could create defensive positions that seemed impossible to get through. His natural armor could probably stop most human weapons. Any of her security team would be crushed in seconds. But something in his boasting caught her attention. He was talking about strength and defense. He expected a certain kind of fight. I accept, Lisa said. Jake grabbed her arm. Captain, you can't look at him. He'll kill you. Vexthar laughed again. The human captain will fight me herself? This is an insult. Send your largest male, your strongest warrior. I am our strongest warrior, Lisa said calmly. I accept your challenge. The general stared at her for a long moment. His officers spoke rapidly in their language, clearly surprised. Vexthar waved them to silence. Very well. If the humans wish to send their leader to die, I will not refuse such a gift. He looked directly at Lisa. When I crush you before your people's eyes, they will understand the power of the Zephyrian Empire. When do we fight? Lisa asked. Tomorrow at dawn. That will give you time to prepare for death. The general turned and walked back toward his army. His officers followed, still speaking in their alien tongue. Lisa and Jake returned to their own lines. As soon as they were out of hearing range, Jake grabbed her arm again. Captain, this is suicide. That thing could break you in half without trying. Maybe, Lisa said, watching the Zephyrian army in the distance. But I noticed something. He talked about strength and defense. He expects a certain kind of fight. What kind of fight? Lisa smiled for the first time that day. The kind he's used to winning. But I've never been one to fight the way my enemies expect. That evening, Lisa sat in her quarters studying every piece of information they had about Zephyrian culture and biology. Jake brought her coffee and sat down across from her desk. The colonists are scared, he said. Pete Davis and his engineering team are already packing emergency supplies. Dr. Susan Clark has the medical bay ready for evacuation. They should be scared, Lisa replied, not looking up from her computer screen. But fear can make people smart too. What are you looking for? Lisa leaned back in her chair. Every species has advantages and disadvantages. The Zephyrians are stronger than us, tougher than us, and they have 4 arms instead of 2, but that doesn't mean they're unbeatable. What could possibly give us an advantage against something like that? Lisa smiled again, the same confident expression from earlier. Time to find out. Lisa spent the entire night reading every report about Zephyrian encounters. The colony's computer held dozens of files from other human settlements that had met these aliens before. Most of the meetings had ended badly for humans, but Lisa was looking for specific details about how Zephyrians fought. Jake brought her food and more coffee as she worked. The young lieutenant was worried, but he stayed quiet and let her concentrate. Outside, the colonists were preparing for the worst. Some packed their belongings while others worked on escape routes through the mountains. Here, Lisa said suddenly, pointing at her screen. Look at this report from the Centauri incident. Jake leaned over to read. The report described a Zephyrian attack on a human trading post. The alien warriors had used their 4 arms to create defensive walls that human weapons could not penetrate. Their fighting style focused on blocking attacks while using their superior strength to crush opponents. They always fight the same way, Lisa said. Defense first, then overwhelming force. They've been doing it for thousands of years. That's what makes them so good at it, Jake replied. How does that help us? Lisa scrolled through more files. Every fighting style has weaknesses. The question is whether those weaknesses matter when your opponent is 3 times stronger than you. She found a medical report about Zephyrian anatomy. Their 4 arms were connected to powerful chest muscles, but the joints were similar to human joints. Their thick skin was like natural armor, but it had to bend at certain places to allow movement. Their confidence comes from experience, Lisa said. They've fought dozens of different species and their techniques work against all of them. But have they ever really fought humans in hand-to-hand combat? Jake thought about it. The reports mostly mention weapons fire and ship battles. I don't see many records of close fighting. Exactly. They know we're smaller and weaker, so they assume they know how we fight. Lisa leaned back in her chair. But what if we don't fight the way they expect? While Lisa studied, General Vexthar was preparing in his own way. The Zephyrian camp was organized like a military base, with neat rows of shelters and equipment. The general sat in his command tent in the traditional meditation position of his people. Zephyrian meditation was different from human practices. It focused on remembering past victories and building confidence for future battles. Vexthar thought about all the enemies he had defeated, all the worlds he had conquered for the Empire. Commander Theknor entered the tent and waited for permission to speak. He was shorter than the general, but still massive by human standards. His skin was darker gray, and he wore the scars of many battles. General, Theknor said in their own language, the warriors are concerned about tomorrow's fight. Concerned? Vexthar opened his yellow eyes. About fighting a single small human? They wonder why you accepted the challenge from such a weak opponent. It seems beneath your status. Vexthar stood up, his forearms stretching toward the tent ceiling. The humans need to understand their place in the galaxy. When I crush their leader before their eyes, they will never again think they can resist the Empire. Captain Zilketh entered the tent behind Theknor. She was the smallest of the three officers, but known for her intelligence. "General, I have been studying the human captain's military record. She has significant combat experience." "Against other humans," Vexthar said dismissively. "Soft creatures fighting other soft creatures. It means nothing." "She was decorated for hand-to-hand combat skills during the Terran border wars," Zilketh continued. "She defeated opponents larger than herself multiple times." The general laughed. "Larger humans are still tiny compared to Zephyrians. Her experience fighting weaklings will not help her against me." Theknor and Zilketh exchanged glances but said nothing more. Their general's confidence was absolute, and questioning it further would be considered disrespectful. Back in the human camp, Lisa finally found what she was looking for. A detailed analysis of Zephyrian combat techniques written by a human anthropologist who had studied their culture for years. "Jake, look at this," she said, highlighting sections of text. "Zephyrian fighting is based on honor and tradition. They have specific forms and techniques that have been passed down for generations. That makes them predictable? Maybe. Their four-armed defensive style is designed to counter the attacks they're used to facing. High strikes, power attacks, direct confrontations." Lisa stood up and moved to the open space in her quarters. But what if someone attacked from angles they've never seen? She began moving through combat forms she had learned in the Marines. Human martial arts were based on using an opponent's strength and momentum against them, techniques designed for smaller fighters to defeat larger ones. "The thing is," Lisa said, continuing her movements, "they've probably never fought anyone who wasn't trying to overpower them. Every species they've encountered either matches their strength or tries to outfight them directly." Jake watched her practice. "So you're going to do what?" "I'm going to fight like a human." Lisa stopped moving and looked at him. Not like a smaller Zephyrian. Like something they've never seen before. The night passed slowly. In the human camp, Pete Davis and his engineering team finished preparing evacuation routes. They had mapped 3 different paths. Through the mountains that could get the colonists to the emergency pickup zone. Dr. Susan Clark made sure all medical supplies were ready for transport, but not everyone was preparing to run. Some of the security team were cleaning weapons and checking equipment. If their captain somehow won the fight, they would need to be ready for anything. Lisa spent the last few hours before dawn practicing movements and thinking about everything she had learned. Zephyrian joints bent in specific ways. Their balance was different because of their height and forearms. Their skin was thick but had to be flexible at connection points. Most importantly, their fighting style had never been tested against someone who refused to fight their way. As the sun began to rise over the alien landscape, Lisa put on her standard combat uniform and checked her equipment one last time. She would fight without weapons or special armor, as agreed, but her mind was now full of possibilities that General Vexthar had never considered. Jake met her outside her quarters. The young lieutenant looked tired and worried, but he tried to smile. "Any final orders, Captain?" Lisa looked toward the valley where the fight would take place. Both armies were already moving into position. The Zephyrians marched in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. The humans walked more slowly, many of them looking scared but determined. "If this goes wrong," Lisa said, "get everyone to the evacuation routes. Don't wait to see what happens. And if it goes right," Lisa smiled one more time, "then we're going to have a very interesting conversation with the general about respecting human capabilities." They walked together toward the valley, where thousands of alien warriors waited to watch their leader crush the small human who dared to challenge him. But Lisa was no longer thinking about the size difference or the odds against her. She was thinking about every assumption the Zephyrians had made about humans, and how wrong they might be. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley as both armies gathered around the fighting area. The Zephyrians formed a perfect circle, their tall forms blocking out sections of sky. Each warrior held weapons they would not need today, but their presence reminded everyone watching of the Empire's military power. The human colonists clustered together on their side of the circle. Pete Davis stood with his engineering crew, their faces showing fear and hope mixed together. Dr. Susan Clark had her medical bag ready, though everyone knew it would probably not be needed. If their captain lost, there would be nothing left to treat. In the center of the circle, a flat area of red dirt had been marked out as the fighting ground. It was roughly 30 feet across, large enough for combat but small enough that neither fighter could run far. The alien soil crunched under boots and alien feet as the army settled into position. General Vexthar entered the circle first. He had removed his military decorations and weapon harnesses, but his natural advantages were clear. 8 feet tall with skin like gray armor, he moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. His 4 arms swung freely as he walked, each one thick with muscle. The Zephyrian army began a low chanting in their own language. It was a traditional war song, something they sang before battles to honor their warriors. The sound echoed off the valley walls, deep and threatening. Lisa entered the circle from the human side. The contrast was immediate and shocking. She looked tiny compared to her opponent, a normal human woman facing an alien giant. Her combat uniform was clean and practical, but it offered no protection against the creature she would fight. Jake Powell watched from the edge of the circle, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to call out to his captain, to tell her this was madness. But orders were orders, and Lisa had made her choice. "Human captain," General Vexthar said loudly, his voice carrying to both armies. "You may still surrender. I will make your death quick if you admit the superiority of the Zephyrian Empire." "I'm not here to surrender," Lisa replied. Her voice was calm and steady, showing no fear. "I'm here to prove that humans are stronger than you think." The general laughed, and several of his warriors joined in. The sound was like rocks falling down a mountain. "Stronger? Look at yourself, small creature. You are a child compared to me." Lisa began walking around the edge of the fighting circle. She moved smoothly, her eyes never leaving the general but her attention taking in everything about him. His stance, his balance, the way his forearms moved when he gestured. "Size isn't everything," she said. "Sometimes the biggest advantage is being underestimated." Vexthar stopped laughing. He had expected the human to show fear or beg for mercy. Instead, she seemed almost relaxed. It annoyed him. "Enough talk," the general declared. He moved to the center of the circle and took a fighting position that Lisa had read about in the reports. His 4 arms created overlapping barriers in front of his body, each hand ready to block attacks from any direction. "Come then, human. Show me this strength you speak of." Lisa continued circling, studying his defensive stance. It was exactly what the reports had described. All 4 arms positioned to stop direct attacks, his thick skin ready to absorb impacts, his superior reach keeping enemies at a distance. It was a perfect defense against every enemy the Zephyrians had ever fought. But Lisa was not planning to fight like a Zephyrian. She moved closer, but not in a straight line. Her approach was indirect, forcing the general to constantly adjust his position to track her movement. She could see his arms shifting to maintain their defensive pattern. "Are you afraid to attack?" Vexthar taunted. "Perhaps you have realized the foolishness of your challenge." Lisa did not respond. She was counting his movements, timing the small delays when he shifted from one defensive position to another. Every fighting style had rhythms, and she was learning his. The general grew impatient. He began incorporating small offensive moves into his defense, swinging one arm to try to catch Lisa as she circled. His reach was enormous, but she stayed just outside the range of his casual strikes. "Stand still and fight," Vexthar roared. His yellow eyes blazed with frustration. "Stop running like a coward." This brought cheers from the Zephyrian army. They began chanting again, calling for their general to end the fight quickly. The humans watched in nervous silence, unable to understand what their captain was trying to do. Lisa suddenly changed direction, moving toward the general instead of away. But her approach was low and angled, nothing like the high. Direct attacks his defensive training was designed to stop. Vexthar's forearms moved to intercept her, but the angle of her attack forced him to adjust his stance. For just a moment, his perfect defensive pattern was disrupted. Lisa did not try to break through his guard. Instead, she used the opening to get closer, close enough to study the details of his anatomy that reports could not provide. She saw where his thick skin had to bend at the joints, where his 4 arms attached to his massive chest. The general swung at her with 2 arms simultaneously, strikes that would have crushed a human skull, but Lisa was already moving away. Her evasion timed perfectly to avoid the attacks while staying close enough to gather more information. "Fight me properly," Vexthar demanded. He was breathing harder now, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit. "Stand and face me like a warrior." "I am fighting you," Lisa said calmly. "Just not the way you expected." She began a series of rapid feints and direction changes, forcing the general to react constantly. His four-armed defensive system was designed for strength and protection, but it was also heavy and took time to reposition. Lisa's attacks were not trying to cause damage. They were tests, probes to learn exactly how his defenses worked. Where did he have to put his arms to block low attacks? How did his balance change when he leaned forward? What happened when she attacked from his left side versus his right? The Zephyrian army was growing restless. Their general was clearly dominating the fight, keeping the small human at bay with ease. But why was it taking so long? Why had he not simply crushed her already? Commander Theknor watched with growing concern. He had seen the general fight many times, and this was different. Usually Vexithar's opponents tried to match his strength or find gaps in his armor. This human was doing something else entirely. Captain Zilketh was thinking the same thing. The human was not fighting to win, at least not in any way she understood. She was fighting to learn. Lisa completed another circle around the general, staying just out of reach of his increasingly angry swipes. She had gathered enough information now. She understood how his defensive system worked, where its strengths were, and more importantly, where its weaknesses might be. The general's forearms could block attacks from any single direction, but they were optimized for the kinds of attacks Zephyrians made against each other. High strikes using superior reach and strength, power attacks designed to break through armor and bone. But human fighting styles were different. They were based on smaller fighters defeating larger ones, on using speed and technique instead of raw power, and most importantly, they included moves that took advantage of joint mechanics that Zephyrian anatomy shared with human anatomy. Lisa stopped circling and faced the general directly for the first time. The massive alien warrior settled into his strongest defensive position, all four arms ready to block whatever she might try. "Ready to surrender yet?" Vexthar asked, his voice still confident despite his growing frustration. Lisa smiled, the same calm expression she had worn since entering the circle. "I'm ready to show you something new." Around the circle, both armies leaned forward. The real fight was about to begin. Lisa moved forward with sudden speed, but not in the direct assault that General Vexthar expected. Instead, she dropped low and came in at an angle that forced him to bend his defensive position in ways it was not designed for. The general's forearms moved to intercept her, but the low angle of her attack created problems for his traditional defense. His arms had to reach down and across his body, pulling him slightly off balance. Lisa did not try to break through his guard with force. Instead, she used the opening to get inside his reach, closer than any Zephyrian opponent had ever managed. From this position, she could see details of his anatomy that would be crucial in the next few moments. Vexthar tried to grab her with two of his hands while blocking with the other two. His strength was enormous, and if he got a solid grip, the fight would be over immediately. But Lisa was already moving, using the techniques she had learned fighting larger opponents in the Marines. She slipped between his arms like water flowing around rocks. Her movements were smooth and controlled, each step calculated to keep her in positions where his strength advantage meant nothing. The general roared in frustration and swept two arms in wide arcs, trying to catch her with brute force. The attacks were powerful enough to break bones, but they hit only empty air. Lisa was already somewhere else, still inside his defensive perimeter. "Stand still," Vexthar bellowed. He spun around, trying to face her directly, but she moved with him, staying in his blind spots. The Zephyrian army watched in growing amazement. Their invincible general was flailing at empty air while the tiny human seemed to dance around him. Some of the warriors began muttering to each other in their own language, confused by what they were seeing. Commander Theknor leaned forward, his scarred face showing concern. "She is not fighting to win," he said quietly to Captain Zilketh. "She is fighting to position herself." "Position for what?" Zilketh asked. They got their answer a moment later. Lisa had been studying the way the general's forearms connected to his massive chest. The joints were similar to human shoulders but larger and supporting much more weight. They were strong, but they followed the same basic mechanical principles as any joint. More importantly, Zephyrian defensive training assumed that attacks would come from outside their reach. Their techniques were designed to stop enemies before they got close, not to deal with someone who was already inside their guard. Lisa found the position she had been looking for. She was beside the general's left side, close enough to touch him but in a spot where only one of his arms could reach her effectively. His other 3 arms were blocked by his own body. Vexithar realized the danger and tried to step away, but Lisa moved with him. She had learned his balance and timing during their earlier exchanges. She knew exactly when he would be most vulnerable. The moment came when the general shifted his weight to turn toward her. For just an instant, one of his left arms was extended and slightly isolated from the others. Lisa struck, but her attack was nothing like what the Zephyrians expected. Instead of trying to punch or kick with human strength against alien armor, she used a grappling technique designed to control joints and leverage. She grabbed the general's extended arm with both hands, but not to wrestle with him. Instead, she applied pressure and torque at specific points, using the mechanical principles of joint manipulation that worked on any anatomy with similar bone structure. Vexthar felt something he had never experienced before in combat. Pain shot through his arm as the small human did something to his elbow joint that his defensive training had never prepared him for. He tried to pull away, but Lisa's position gave her leverage while his size worked against him. The more force he applied, the more pressure was created on the joint she was attacking. "What are you doing?" The general gasped, confusion and pain clear in his voice. "Something new," Lisa replied calmly. She adjusted her grip and applied more precise pressure to the joint. The human colonists watched in amazement as their captain seemed to wrestle with the massive alien warrior. They could not see exactly what she was doing, but the general's confident posture was changing to something that looked almost like panic. Jake Powell found himself holding his breath. He had seen Lisa practice hand-to-hand combat techniques, but never against anything like this. The size difference was so extreme that it seemed impossible for any human technique to work, but it was working. The general's movements were becoming more desperate and less controlled. His other 3 arms flailed as he tried to reach Lisa, but her position beside his body kept her safe from most of his attacks. Captain Zilketh understood first. "She is attacking the joint," she said in amazement. "Not the armor, not the muscle. The joint itself." Commander Theknor's eyes widened as he realized what the human was doing. "Our defensive training never considered such an attack. We defend against strikes and cuts, not joint manipulation." On the fighting ground, General Vexthar was discovering the same thing. His legendary defensive techniques were useless against an opponent who was not trying to break through his guard, but instead was attacking the mechanical structure of his body itself. Lisa increased the pressure gradually, using techniques that would disable a human joint, but adapted for the larger alien anatomy. She could feel the stress building in the general's arm as his own movements worked against him. "Stop this," Vexthar demanded. He tried to use his superior strength to simply lift Lisa off the ground, but her positioning prevented him from getting proper leverage. "You said no human could break your guard," Lisa said, still maintaining her calm tone. "You were right, so I decided not to try." The general's frustration turned to genuine alarm as he realized he could not escape the hold. Every movement he made seemed to make his situation worse. The pain in his arm was unlike anything he had experienced in hundreds of battles. Around the circle, both armies watched in stunned silence. The Zephyrian warriors could not understand what they were seeing. Their general, who had never been defeated, was being controlled by a creature a third his size. The human colonists were equally amazed, but for different reasons. Dr. Susan Clark found herself leaning forward, trying to understand the mechanics of what their captain was doing. Pete Davis whispered to his engineering team, "She's using leverage like a machine." Lisa made one final adjustment to her grip and position. She had been building toward this moment since the fight began, learning everything she needed to know about Zephyrian anatomy and combat expectations. "General," she said quietly, so only he could hear, "you can surrender now, or I can show your army what happens when human technique meets alien overconfidence." Vexthar's yellow eyes blazed with fury and pain. "I will never surrender to a weak human." "Then let me show you something about human strength," Lisa replied. She applied the final technique she had been preparing, a joint lock that used the general's own body weight and struggling against him. It was a move designed to disable an opponent without causing permanent damage, but adapted for anatomy much larger than human. The sharp crack that echoed across the valley was unmistakable. The sound of General Vexthar's arm breaking cut through the morning air like a thunderclap. The massive Zephyrian warrior dropped to his knees, clutching his broken limb while a roar of pain and shock escaped his throat. His yellow eyes were wide with disbelief as he stared at the small human woman standing calmly beside him. The silence that followed was complete and absolute. 300 Zephyrian warriors stood frozen, their weapons forgotten as they tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Their invincible general, the warrior who had conquered 12 worlds, had been defeated by a creature they considered barely worth noticing. Lisa stepped back from the fallen general, giving him space but staying alert. The fight was over, but she knew the next few moments would determine whether this victory meant anything or just started a larger battle. "The challenge is complete," she said loudly, her voice carrying to both armies. "General Vexthar has been defeated. According to the terms we agreed on, the Zephyrian forces will withdraw from this world." Vexthar struggled to his feet, his broken arm hanging useless at his side. Pain clouded his features, but something else was there too. For the first time in his military career, he was looking at an opponent with genuine respect. "How?" he asked, his voice rough with pain and confusion. "Your strength is nothing compared to mine. Your weapons could not penetrate my hide. How did you break me?" Lisa helped steady him as he swayed on his feet. The gesture surprised both armies, showing the kind of honor that Zephyrian culture valued above almost everything else. "You were right about human strength," she said. "We are weaker than you, but you made assumptions about how we would use that weakness." She looked around the circle at the watching Zephyrian warriors. "Your defensive techniques are perfect against enemies who fight like Zephyrians. But humans learned long ago that there are many ways to win a fight besides overpowering your opponent." Commander Theknor approached the edge of the fighting circle, his scarred face showing a mixture of anger and curiosity. "You used some kind of trick." "This was not honorable combat." "It was completely honorable," Lisa replied firmly. "No weapons, no armor, no outside help. I use techniques available to any fighter who chooses to learn them. The fact that your training never considered such methods is not my problem." Captain Zilketh had been studying the entire fight with professional interest. As the most intelligent of the Zephyrian officers, she was beginning to understand the implications of what had happened. "General," she said quietly, "the human is correct. She fought within the rules we established. We simply never considered that rules could be followed in ways we did not expect." Vexithar looked at his broken arm, then at Lisa, then at his army of confused warriors. His worldview was crumbling, but he was enough of a soldier to recognize skill when he saw it. "You have defeated me fairly," he said finally. "The Zephyrian Third Fleet will withdraw from this world as agreed." A cheer went up from the human colonists. Pete Davis hugged Dr. Susan Clark while his engineering team shouted with relief and joy. Jake Powell was grinning so widely his face hurt, though he was still amazed by what his captain had accomplished. But Lisa was not finished. She could see that this moment had potential beyond just saving one colony. "General," she said, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear, "your army fought with honor by accepting this challenge. My victory does not diminish the courage of your warriors or the strength of your empire." This brought surprised looks from both sides. Vexthar straightened despite his pain, recognizing the diplomatic skill in her words. "What do you propose, human captain?" "I propose that this marks the beginning of understanding between our peoples, not the end of contact." Lisa gestured to both armies. "Today you learned that humans are not the weak prey species you believed us to be. We learned that Zephyrians value honor and keep their word even in defeat." Commander Theknor stepped forward. "You speak of understanding. What kind of understanding?" "The kind that benefits both our peoples," Lisa replied. "You have strength and military tradition. We have techniques and perspectives you have never encountered. Both sides could learn from each other." Captain Zilketh was nodding slowly. "The human fighting methods were unlike anything in our databases. If our enemies learned such techniques before we did—" "Exactly," Lisa said. "This does not have to be about human superiority or Zephyrian dominance. It can be about both species becoming stronger." General Vexthar considered this for a long moment. The pain in his arm was constant, but his mind was working through the implications of what had happened. A single human had shown him that everything he thought he knew about combat was incomplete. "You would share your fighting knowledge?" he asked. "In exchange for sharing yours," Lisa confirmed, "and perhaps other forms of cooperation as well. This planet has resources both our peoples could use without conflict." The general looked at his officers, then at his army. The Zephyrian warriors were still processing their shock, but he could see some of them were beginning to look at the humans with new interest instead of contempt. "I will need to consult with the Empire," Vexthar said. "But your proposal has merit." Lisa nodded. "Take all the time you need. We will be here." As the Zephyrian army began to organize for their withdrawal, Dr. Susan Clark approached with her medical kit. "General, I should examine your arm. The break needs proper treatment." Vexthar looked at the human doctor with surprise. "You would treat your enemy?" "You are not my enemy anymore," Susan replied simply. "You are someone who needs medical attention." This small gesture seemed to impact the general more than the entire fight had. He allowed Susan to examine his arm while Lisa watched the two armies beginning to separate. Jake Powell approached his captain as the Zephyrians started loading their equipment. "Captain, do you think they will really consider cooperation?" "I think we just changed how an entire species views humanity," Lisa replied. "That general is going to return to his empire with a very different report than he expected to write." Over the next several hours, the Zephyrian withdrawal proceeded smoothly. General Vexthar, his arm properly set and splinted by Dr. Susan Clark, met with Lisa one final time before departing. "Captain Morgan," he said formally, "I have sent a full report of today's events to the Empire. I have recommended that diplomatic contact be established between our peoples." "I look forward to those discussions," Lisa replied. "I have one question," the general added. "When you first accepted my challenge, did you know you could defeat me?" Lisa smiled. "I knew I could try something you had never seen before. Whether it would work against someone of your skill was the question I needed answered." Vexthar laughed for the first time since his defeat. "You risked everything on an untested theory? Sometimes that is what courage means." As the Zephyrian ships lifted off from the planet's surface, Lisa received a message from Earth Command. Word of the duel had already reached other human colonies and was being transmitted across known space. The message was brief, but significant. "Reports of your victory are spreading throughout the galaxy. Multiple alien species are requesting diplomatic contact with humanity. Our status in galactic politics has changed overnight." "Well done, Captain." Lisa looked up at the alien sky where the Zephyrian ships were disappearing into space. Pete Davis and his team were already making plans to expand the colony. Dr. Susan Clark was organizing medical supplies in case other alien visitors proved less diplomatic than the Zephyrians. Jake Powell approached with another message. "Captain, we are receiving communication requests from 4 different alien governments. They all want to establish formal contact with humanity." "Schedule them," Lisa said. "But make sure they understand that any meetings will be conducted with respect for human capabilities." As the day ended, Lisa stood on the ridge overlooking the valley where the duel had taken place. The red dust had been disturbed by thousands of feet, but it was already beginning to settle back into smooth patterns. A single broken arm had changed everything. General Vexthar's assumption of human weakness had become the foundation for a new understanding between species. The galaxy would never again dismiss humanity as insignificant. And somewhere in space, a Zephyrian general was learning to use his remaining 3 arms while writing reports that would revolutionize his empire's understanding of what it meant to be strong.